Hi, welcome to Ref Lounge. I'm joined by Keith Hackett, former Premier League boss and also international referee. So what I wanted to do, having spent quite a bit of time with Keith and some of the stories that I've heard over the years, things that have happened, was to actually interview and say, what was your favourite game? Those type of questions. So here we go. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So, right, the big one. What year did you qualify as a referee?
1960. Long time ago, here in Sheffield. At that time, we attended 6 evening lectures. Sid Robinson, a former referee, was doing the, if you like, teaching, and it was very enjoyable. At that time, I've got to tell you, I had no intention of referee. I did it to understand the laws more. I was captain of a local football team, but then refereed my first game, Intake versus Sheffield United Juniors at Cadman Road, the school, and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Excellent. So, for me, as a referee, there's a moment where you say, I can do this. What was yours?
I don't know. I'll tell you, it came over a period, and that was, I was getting so much enjoyment, you know. I was putting in a lot of training, getting fit. It was more demanding refereeing than playing physically, and I just got the enjoyment and got the bug, as we all as referees do.
Yeah.
And then the challenges come. But for me, you know, the enjoyment on a Sunday morning was going out and facing the challenge of refereeing teams like Arbourthorne EA, Black Bull Taverners, players who were playing in the Midland League and earning money, and had a different attitude on Sunday morning to most. They wanted to kick 7 bells out of each other, and in the middle, these were challenging games. I learned my craft in the Sheffield Sunday League for sure.
Definitely. What was your first pro game?
Well, as a referee, it was Stockport County versus Northampton Town.
Right.
And the point to make is, you know, I was, if you like, one of the younger referees that had done really well to get to the professional level.
Yeah.
But I'd also had 12 years of refereeing.
Yeah.
And I was doing 100 games minimum a season. If anybody sort of knocked on the door or phoned home, yes, I'd go with a bag and referee. And therefore, that first walkout, you're in charge of a football league game, is an important one you remember.
No, definitely. What was the first international?
That brings back memories. David Allison, who became a football league referee and boss of the football league referees, was in fact on the line. And it was Floriana versus Standard Liège they were from Belgium. Floriana was a team in Malta, and the big shock came when we went to the stadium and we walked out, and it was ash.
Okay.
We were playing on ash. If you saw the picture of the faces of the players, because Standard Liège had Belgium internationals playing, and they couldn't believe it. And I always remember one of the players going down, doing a bit of a flying Superman on the ground, and coming up, his face blackened, his shirt blackened, and everything. But it was a great experience. Yeah.
What's the favourite game you've officiated? Have you got a standout game?
There's two, and they do match. You know, as a boy, I was a Sheffield Wednesday fan. I lived at Parkwood Springs. I mean, it's just a tip at the moment now. But effectively, my dad used to walk us to the game, and therefore, my first game at Hillsbury in the middle, Liverpool versus Arsenal in '79, was a game that I'll always remember. FA Cup semi-final. Yeah. I suppose the 1981 FA Cup replay between Manchester City and Spurs, and knowing that one of the most iconic goals scored in that competition, Ricky Villa of Spurs, is remembered almost on a monthly basis. Certainly now with social media, I'm asked a lot of questions about it. But the reason I remember it is it sums up football, because on the first game, which was a 1-1 draw, Ricky Vere was substituted, and I can remember, because we didn't have foreign players, these were like the first overseas players in the game, and I remember seeing this tall guy, long flowing black hair, walking around the perimeter of the pitch having been substituted, dejected, absolutely dejected. And then of course the following Thursday he scores the winning goal and he's elated, and that to me in a way sums up football.
Well and truly. Have you ever had a game where you thought, I'd have reffed that differently?
Not really. I've always felt that confidence, not arrogance, is important. So you put in what you get out. You get out what you put in. And from my perspective, no. When I had some difficult decisions to make, and some were made life very uneasy for a period, and still to this day, the sending off of Tony Gale in the FA Cup semi-final. West Ham United versus Nottingham Forest sticks in the craw of West Ham fans, and they still remind me.
Yeah. What about the Battle of Old Trafford? Because we've watched that back.
Yeah. I wouldn't do anything different. I mean, what we've got to understand is that mass confrontation was in its infancy. The one thing I did when I became boss of the PGMOL is start to write out processes, criteria for how we would deal with these scenarios. And that mass confrontation scenario of how you handle it, how the assistants now come in off the touchline, how they look at the one nearest the technical area doesn't come too quickly. They watch for the runners. If you know that you're going to have a minimum 2 yellow cards, but what the referee has to do initially is issue his reds. Then he asks his assistants, are there any more? Once, if there are, then take that red and then start to do the yellows and do the same. So the process, if you like, made life a lot easier. And I always remember sitting in the stadium watching the League Cup final, which Howard Webb refereed superbly. And then in the 90 plus minutes, there was an altercation, mass confrontation. Howard Webb produced 2 reds. Yeah. If you remember, Wenger and Mourinho came on to try and calm it down. He got rid of those 2, in fairness, and then there was another red that was brought to his attention, and then yellows. I thought, when you write a criteria and you discuss it with referees, and then you see it in operation, there's a bit of a glow that says, I like what you've done here.
Oh no, it's really, really good. So, what's the favourite referee you've managed?
I think the favourite one and the most challenging one was Mark Halsey.
Okay.
Who remains a colleague and a friend.
Yeah.
He's passionate about football. He's passionate about refereeing. People, he has a go at referees, but he's the only referee that I've had to say, look Mark, I think you're running around too much. Can you slow down? Because sometimes he would do 15,000 metres in a game.
Right.
When the average was 11.5.
Yeah.
He covered every blade of grass. When you looked at the Prozone map of the places he ran, you'd be looking for the green bits, because that's what he was like. And if he didn't get the appointments, he'd be knocking on your door. The face and expression would tell you he's not happy. When you went for something to eat, he'd probably sit at the other end of the table. He's that passionate about the game, and I have these conversations regularly with him. He's still much the same. Clattenburg, for another reason, I sat in Hillsborough at a reserve game, and he trotted out. I hadn't got a clue who he was. I was sat with a local Sheffield United fan, Peter Cromer, and we watched in amazement a performance that was absolutely, truly outstanding. And I've gone, he's the best prospect I've ever seen. Yeah. And then started the drive to ensure that through the system he came through pretty quickly, and he has never failed me in that scenario. We've had times of difficulty, but I can tell you, well, you and I, didn't we? We saw him referee the Beijing Derby.
Yeah.
He was outstanding.
He was
and there's a personal pride in Mark that says, I'm going to go out. His fitness is never in doubt. Yet he told us, didn't he, before the match, he'd lost a few pounds because he wasn't satisfied with his own performance. It just epitomises a top-class referee, because Webb was the same.
Good self-assessment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They self-assess, they're demanding of themselves, they're critical of themselves, but they're willing to listen.
Yeah.
They may not always accept what you say, but I can remember when Howard was in top form, driving to meet him at Brinsworth, where he was doing his training, Park Gate.
Right.
And he was doing his training, and I just sat in the car and watched him train.
Yeah.
And I thought, there is the discipline. This is what I think sometimes the energy that is required to referee a top game means that you've got to put a lot of effort in to get there.
No, definitely. So, as a player, who was your biggest thorn in your side? So player.
I think the one who wanted to referee the match, there was probably two. Brian Orton was one of Luton. The other was Brian Robson.
Brian Robson.
Yeah. I tell a story about Brian Robson because in a game against Wimbledon, he dived in for a ball into the penalty area. He dived. He was about 2 foot off the floor, clashed and was knocked out. When I got there, right, he's gurgling, and he was slightly turning a different colour. I was really concerned, so I blew the whistle to get the trainer on. And in the meantime, I'm looking down his throat, and there's the tongue blocking everything. And I always remember that, because the next game I refereed at Old Trafford, there was no thank you. There was the first exchange of words was, I've got to put up with you. But again, that doesn't say that I didn't admire him as a player. Because as a player, he was outstanding. Difficult to referee, but he was a winner. And the players that I've come across, the winners, give you a bit of pain, but then you know that they want to win.
Yeah, no, that's What about working with a player? Who's the best one you've worked with on the pitch?
Smile. Emily News.
Okay.
And I smile because in my first visit to Anfield against Wolves, I think I cautioned him within about 3 minutes.
Right.
Now that's a bit of tension from me.
Yeah.
I'm wound up. I'm at Anfield. I've just listened in the tunnel to, the song, and the atmosphere is electric there. And on that day we didn't quite get on. But then through the years and the number of times I refereed Liverpool, we had mutual respect. And then when he came to manage Rotherham, I went in and talked to the players at his request. He played local football, didn't he?
Yeah.
In Sheffield.
Yeah, in Sheffield.
And I refereed them on the odd occasion. And then he played for Derek Dooley's All Stars. I got to know him really well. His view on refereeing was different to mine, of course. He was critical, but he was fair.
Yeah, no, that's good. So, how did the referee stats? So, when you were approached to be part of PGMOL, okay, how did the referee stats change under your watch, so to speak?
I think it's a great question. I think first of all, in my refereeing career, I'd lost 2 jobs because of refereeing. I was appointed to referee New Zealand, Australia. And I took that game and lost my job. And then I became a director of a local company here in Sheffield. And I was appointed to the European Cup final and could not get time off work. And therefore, from that point onwards, I didn't referee the European Cup final. That was always a disappointment, remains a disappointment now. I said, we've got to go professional. And I had discussions with Sir Dave Richards, who was then chairman of Sheffield Wednesday, and he and Graham McCrell put forward papers that I helped write, and the professional game was formed. And to answer your question, what changed? The speed of the game was changing. Players were becoming, if you like, overseas players, technically gifted, putting those long, accurate passes, not into touch, but to another player. So the physical demands and the physicality of the game changed. In my era, endurance.
Yeah.
Go out, run for an hour. Are you fit? Yeah. Do a bit more. We needed to bring in, and I brought in Matt Weston, who's now Professor Matt Weston, working for Pro Referee in America. Matt came in and we sat. He said we needed a lifestyle change, and the whole scenario of referees' fitness regimes changed. The warm-up. We were the first country to have a warm-up. We introduced it. Matt wrote it.
Yeah.
And I smile now when I go to Penistone Church and I see the three officials warming up. I'm thinking, great. You know, in my era, people would have a cigarette. If it was Harold Hackney, the referee from Barnsley, he'd have half a glass of whiskey to warm him up. Things changed.
Yeah.
The dynamics of the game has changed. And this is why I become, critical of the modern referee. Because I've watched people like Halsey, Webb, Clattenburg, and therefore I can measure referees against those three referees and say, how do they compare physically in terms of their movement compared to them?
Yeah.
And I don't think the game's changed from their era. I think it's the same. It's still fast, it's quick. And, I watched Mike Dean last night putting in some long sprints and I'm going, 51 and you're delivering those, mate.
Yeah.
And then I watch others and met too many of them not doing that. So that's the change.
Yeah. You also brought in some technology.
Yeah, when you're in front of a big crowd and you're running and you're peering across, picking up the assistant's flag can sometimes be difficult. I wanted to aid the communication, and I'd watched a rugby union game on TV.
Yeah.
And then I decided, because I was then the development manager of PGMOL, and I went to Twickenham. I spoke with the refereeing fraternity. I listened to a game. Rugby wasn't my passion, but I listened in. I was gobsmacked of how this could be used. Came back, and in fairness said to Richard Scudamore, I want this kit, and I think it was 350,000 quid's worth of investment.
Yeah.
So it wasn't small. It had to work, and we kitted referees out. People. When people sweat, do we have the mould adhere to the ear? All those sort of things. We had a problem with at Chelsea, where referees were refereeing the football match, but they were getting signals that I want a cab from Kensington High Street to Oxford Circus or whatever. Those were coming over whilst the referee was refereeing. So we had encryption problems to overcome. Yeah, great.
Because goal line technology,
no,
that was yours as well.
Goal line technology, I can remember standing up and saying that. The kits. I think the big one was Polar Heart monitors.
Yeah.
Michael Douglas was then the managing director of Polar, and I had a meeting with him, and I said I wanted to know more. I sat with a sports scientist. Matt Weston was aware of, I'm not branding here, Polar and what it could do. And what it meant was that I had a fingerprint on every referee, because the referee was with me every fortnight for a couple of 3 days. But how did I know they were doing the training?
Yeah.
And we didn't. We just had to assume their integrity levels were high enough until one referee decided to put in a duplicate. He hadn't done the training, but he put in the same stats, which is not possible.
Right.
So as a result, I'm suddenly thinking, right, Polar, let's measure, let's download. We then had to bring in a second sports scientist,
Yeah.
Adam Kerr from Sheffield United, joined us, and then we got a full detail of input. And training moved from being less efficient to being efficient.
That was good, that.
So we introduced
It's all about raising standards.
Well, we brought in a nutritionist because we
Yeah.
needed a lifestyle change.
Yeah,
You know, some people had been earning £12,000 a year,
yeah,
and now we're earning 50,000.
yeah,
And their lifestyle, instead of going to McDonald's once a month,
yeah.
suddenly they're going to 3 and 4 star restaurants twice a week.
Right.
I know that might be an exaggeration, but they suddenly started eating their own food.
Yeah.
And so we had to give that level of advice. And then I think one of the best things I ever did was bring in Professor Craig Mahoney, a sports psychologist. And the first thing we agreed was I wouldn't sit in on those meetings. So I'd be outside the room listening to all this laughter, knowing full well that he was making an impact.
Yeah.
He sat in the technical area in the box to understand the pressures on refereeing.
Yeah.
Did a lot of work for us. And then he moved on, and we brought Professor Ian Maynard in from Sheffield Hallam University, and he continued that route.
Okay. So, as former head of PGMOL, you've been highly critical of match officials, and that's been alongside the other officials that were refereeing during your time. Now, I see a lot on Twitter say, "Oh, it's bitterness." Is it bitterness, or is it for the greater good? Is it that drive of standards?
Well, I retired from the job to take up another work as being the referee ambassador for the Premier League, so I was quite happy with that. I think my term of office had come to an end. I'd done and achieved what I wanted to achieve, so I was quite clear on that.
Yeah.
It's not bitterness. It's you know, I'm an ex-sales and marketing director.
Yes.
So I'd go to board meetings, and the boss would say, "I want £500,000 worth of sales out of you this month."
Yeah.
And I had to then say to a sales force, "You got to deliver." And if they didn't deliver, they were on warning letters. And if they failed to secure the figures that I wanted, the sadness was they were moved on.
Yeah.
So if I'm running a sweetie shop and I'm going to sell the same amount of sweets this year and next year, and eating and lighting's costs are going up, staffing costs are going up, I'm making less money.
Yeah.
So I've put my business hat on and said, right, I'm demanding of officials,
Yeah.
I want them as referees to be better.
Yeah.
And therefore, the criticism is, where am I benchmarked? I use Kalina as my benchmark. And I said, how can I get the English standard of refereeing up to his level?
Yes.
And I analysed him.
Yeah.
What distance he was running, the number of sprints. You know, we were doing on average 25 sprints a game. Kalina was producing 40.
Right.
Howard Webb, in his games, was producing 50.
Right.
Months afterwards.
Yeah.
We changed the dynamics. How was he dealing? You know, suddenly I'm looking at Kalina and I'm seeing his eyes, I'm seeing how he stands, and I'm thinking, wow. And then I look at his dynamic sprints. We're nowhere near them. You know, and all of a sudden I'm going, wow, he can move from penalty area to penalty area in about 13 seconds.
Yeah.
Right? Webb could do that in 11.
Right.
After all the training and the changes. So if I'm using Alzi, Webb, Clattenburg, Poll, Durkin, these referees that had a career and were successful, and I'm measuring those guys up because I want them to be better. Yeah. Right. I know that they can be better. Yeah. If they put more effort in, but you only put more effort in if you put more oil and petrol into the engine. Yeah. And what you have to do is there's nobody coaching them effectively, and there's nobody got an hand or a knee in the back or a boot up the backside when they don't perform. The referees, somebody said to me when I left, it's going to be easier because at the moment we're refereeing in fear. I was sorry that they thought that. Yeah. But my demands were that they had to be better the next match than they were this. Yeah. And they also knew, because I was very open, the level of accountability was, if you didn't perform well, you didn't get the appointment. Yeah. That cost them money. Yeah. And if you really didn't do well, I'd move you on. And there were referees Andy Durso, very competent, good referee, not good enough at the Premier League level. There was Matt Messias, who was an international referee.
Yeah.
Well, I said, Matt, you can have a year on the Football League and get your confidence back and probably come back. He chose not to, so he went.
Right.
So, it's not a chip.
Yeah.
It's just, look, I think we had the best referees in the world. A cadre of world-class referees, which was my business plan.
Yeah.
I don't think we've got that at the moment. I want to see new, younger referees coming through with that desire to achieve that and to challenge people like Mike Dean and Martin Atkinson, because they have been very good referees, you know, very consistent performers. And that's why. And when I look, and you know, I had good working relationships with New Zealand FA, Rod Pelosi, Ted Kearney in Brisbane as a referee coach, and they came to England, they worked with us, some referees, Jared Gillett came, and Jared Gillett went back to Australia, became their number one international referee, their number one referee. Yeah. And the same with other, you know, Mike Lester, Peter O'Leary, you know, the woman referee, Keatley, who all have been to World Cups. Yeah. And all that I can say is that I think that people like Rod Pelosi and Ted Kearney both filtered the work that we were doing. They saw it at first hand, and then they applied some of those things. I mean, I've got some really nice letters on file from both federations saying thank you very much. And, you know, I see some of that work that I did with the AFC also having positive results. You know, we brought a guy called Christian Jakobsen who phoned me and said, look, could I spend a few days with your referees? I want to see what's going on. Christian was an assistant referee at that time. And Christian came from Iceland under his own costs, spent time with us, and did that on a frequent basis to become Iceland's number one referee. Yeah. And it wasn't me saying, this is what you want you to do. He was watching people like Webb and Clattenburg, talking to them, and they were setting him his fresh goals, because he's suddenly going, I want some of that.
Okay, that was good, thank you. So, right, we're going to, just on here, because you're part of the consultancy team here, you are RRC, you are number one on that one. You've refereed over 1,000 games in over 100 countries, you've brought in some of the best technology, managed the best officials, it ain't a bad little list this, worked with some of the best, so I would consider that as a true expert, because too many people say that they're experts, but why Keys to Football?
There's a system here that has been developed that enables a grassroots referee to, if he comes into the sort of environment in which we operate here, he can secure the training, he can secure advice to develop his career and accelerate his career. You know, he can ask us a question, we can give an answer. We can film his games, he can look at his own game. You know, as a referee out in Concord Park, 22 pitches, try and find them on a Sunday morning, which one you're on. All those scenarios, he can shortcut all those, you know. And there are some really good referees. I mean, I've said it before, I watched referees in the North and East Counties League, and I've seen some really good performances. I saw a Manchester referee a couple of weeks ago at Penistone, and he was watched by Phil Joslin, who's a former Football League referee. And I was surprised to see Phil come to Penistone. But clearly that referee was on the FA's radar, which I think was good, because I'm sitting there, I'd already seen this referee before, and I'm going, he's an outstanding referee. So there are prospects, but there's more than that, because if they, you know, it's a little bit like we become a refereeing family, we share experiences, we, you know, that's what I did when I was a member of Sheffield RA. And when I went, I was totally green. They helped me secure my position as a top class referee. Simple as that. I would come by, there'd be a meeting, I had Brian Baker, who was a footballer, you know, rest in peace, Brian. But Brian would go to games with me, and he would be my personal observer. But I could walk across the room and talk to Mike Lowe and run the line.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'd run the line to Mike Lowe at Bury. And there were others, Jim Card, George McCabe. Now, we had a lot of Football League guys on the list at that particular time, and a pretty buoyant society. I think sometimes there's a gap there, because when I go to referees' meetings, I don't see the numbers that there used to be. It was almost part of the tradition of being a referee. I think we fill that gap. I think that we fill a gap that says, you know, time is precious. Okay, if you want to go on your mobile phone, you want to go on your iPad, you want to go on your laptop, you can read some of the material I write. You can actually see some of the clips.
Do a lesson, find out your weaknesses.
Absolutely.
Understanding. Yeah, it's good. That.
And you know, and you can do it privately if you want. You know, the relationship between a coach and a referee is so important. But sometimes you want a second opinion. Yeah. You know, and we can be that second opinion, but we can also be, you know, hey, let's have a session and let's talk about positioning. Yeah. You know, I'm critical of the movement profiles of referees in the Premier League over recent times because they become detached from play and leaving certain areas exposed. We've seen a slight change back to a traditional penalty area to penalty area. But within that, we can talk down the line and talk to referees about zonal areas. You know, we know, for example, that research says that beyond 20 yards from the ball, or from an incident, the chances are you're going to make an error in judgment. This is why I'm always move, get up with play, get into a selling position. And that's the basis on which refereeing talks. And through the systems we've got here, the technical systems, we can actually take an actual incident in a game at grassroots level or at professional level, and we can actually use that clip to say, this is what we're trying to get over to you. How do you fit, and how do you deal with it? You know, look at that 1996 Carling Cup final on mass confrontation. You've got a model of the world's #1 referee at that time, Howard Webb, dealing with something. The last thing he wants to do in a cup final at Wembley Stadium is
that might have been Cardiff. Was it Cardiff?
It might have been at Cardiff.
It might have been Cardiff.
Yeah, you're right. Last thing you want to do is send somebody off. In a cup final. Right? He sent 3 off. Can you imagine his disappointment? So what a coach can do is go in and say, Howard, what you did was absolutely right. Could you have done something leading up to that to avoid it? Is what the coach has to do. He has to analyse the film and say, look, these are the what ifs. But you know, what we've got here is not just you and I. We've got a team of experts who have actually been referee coaches, who have actually been international referees and assistant referees. You know, when we talk about Guy Beale and Glenn Turner, these are guys who actually say it as it is.
Yeah, they do.
But they've also got a track record that says they've helped people to the very highest level.
Yeah. Right, so quick fire round. Okay, this is what we're going to finish off on, right? So you're the manager of a club, and it's first v second, and the winner wins the league. Right? Who do you appoint?
That's a good one.
So I'm gonna give you 2. And you've got to choose each one. All right. So first choice: Simon Hooper, Kevin Friend.
For the big game that's going to decide the league.
This is it. This is going to decide the league. Who do you want appointed? Simon Hooper or Kevin Friend?
Neither.
And you can't have that. You've got to have one.
Well, it'd have to be Friend on experience.
Kevin Friend, right. Chris Kavanagh or Paul Tierney?
Tierney.
Stuart Atwell or Andre Mariner?
Atwell.
John Moss or Andy Madley?
John Moss.
Martin Atkinson, Anthony Taylor.
Atkinson.
Michael Oliver, Mike Dean.
Oof. Michael Oliver.
Mark Halsey, Graham Paul.
Mark Halsey.
Howard Webb, Jack Taylor.
Howard Webb.
Excellent.
And the reason being is that in certain instances there, I'm looking to the future.
Yeah.
That's what the succession plan has always got to be. At what point can you introduce these referees to a big game?
Yeah.
Are you comfortable that they will deliver? So there's always a risk in when you're sitting down making the appointments. But you know, what I had, and I feel, in a way, being kinder to Mike Riley, is that I had more referees, I think, than he's got in terms of being top class. I had 10.
Yeah.
I could act. So my dilemma was, when I got the sheet of the games, I know full well, for example, when, and this is a difference that I think Mike Riley did against what I did. If I knew that a referee was going out in Europe to a European Cup game, they would either going out before have a top class game that weekend, or coming back they'd have a top class game. And the reason behind that is, the first question they asked is, what game you got next week, or what they've seen the game. So it gives presence and helps that refereeing process. That's one aspect of it. At the same time, you've got to say you've got to give referees the encouragement. Referees have got to see there's a chance. Yeah. They've got to feel part of the team. And that's always difficult. So you have to say to a referee, look, I'm going to give you a run of 3 or 4 games. Coming up, you're going to get 3 or 4 games. I want to see an improvement. Yeah. And part of the process, and why I'm big on smart objectives, is that forms part of the coaching role. These are my expectations. These are the level at which. So I had a league table. 1 to 20, assessors marks. 1 to 20 with former player, former managers, right? Yeah. Couple of administrators acting as match delegates, independent of the PGMOL, paid for by the Premier League, but they marked the referee. Yeah. They went in before the match to go after the match, and therefore I got 2 tables. Right. So I would have a top quartile, A, top 4. Yeah. Top 5. And therefore you would go, right, they're A. Yeah. How many A's have you got in assessor marks? Yeah. Those A's might not be different. Might be different now. Yeah. Because they could be D. Yeah. A, D. So they're good at the refereeing bit. They meet the criteria. Yeah. What are they doing wrong here? Yeah. How does the customer? Because this is back to my marketing. It is, yeah. How does the customer view the performance? But at the moment, we don't have assessors. They have this complete fangled idea that, all input from referees by way of a mark. Yeah. It isn't. We've not got to forget, this is about personality, interaction, dealing with players, dealing with different scenarios. It's a plain sheet of paper when a referee walks out. He's prepared. Yeah. And the delivery is, are you prepared for everything that comes up? And the only way you do that is have that open discussion and debate. I learned a lot more about refereeing when I stopped refereeing. Yeah. By running the PGMOL and listening to the likes of Paul, Halsey, Webb and Clattenburg.
And that's why when you first saw the system at Keys to Football, we had the progress that was put in there, and it was all the colour charts. Correct. And we can actually see where the strengths and the weaknesses are, create action plans directly for that referee.
That's the thing that I'm really
That's
keen
where
on.
it come from.
Absolutely, because you've got a system here where you're on a ladder. Yeah. And if you like, the ladder sometimes plateaus. It's a little bit like that. And what you've got to do is you've got to go, wow, I've made it to that part of the ladder. Yeah. I mean, the pinnacle is I want to get to the top.
Yeah.
But I've also got to understand this is what I've done. I've created a foundation. Where are my strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah.
And you hold on to your strengths.
Yeah.
And then you start to look at the weaknesses and how are you going to develop those weaknesses? How are you going to deal with them? Now, when I used to sit with referees at the RA, I knew what my weaknesses were, and I'd go, tell me, I've had this sort of problem, how can I deal with it? And he'd go, get to know the name.
Yeah.
What? Get to know the name of the player. What for? Well, then next time you address him, he might give you a little bit more respect if you say, now look, Keith, calm down. Alan, I want you to do a bit more.
Yeah.
And that worked.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known that unless I hadn't talked to another referee. So progress is what you've always got to have at refereeing. Now, out there are referees who don't aspire to become Premier League referees or Football League referees. But we still offer them a service.
Yes.
We're going to make their game more enjoyable. Because we're going to say, look, think about your positioning more.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, have you thought about, the triangle movement in terms of managing conflict?
And the clips that we've got regards best practice, the clips that we've got regards different types of free kicks on where you should stand to get the best results, and there's the least risk in where you stand. So we've got all that, which is going to be so good going forward and exciting.
Well, I mean, they're all different challenges, and I try to bring my experience in. I mean, but you might not be aware, but in Mexico, right, up to a few years ago, and it might still be the case, but certainly when I was in Mexico, referees do not talk to players at all. And if they did, they were down-marked by the assessor.
Oh, wow.
So you then see a referee. When I chatted to the boss of the referees at the time, I said to him, look, it's all a bit exaggerated because the arms and the facial expressions were confrontational. And then the explanation is that sometimes words can create a different effect. So you learn through those experiences, and what we're about is passing those on.
Magic. So that'll finish the interview for now. Hope you've learned something. It's been a great insight from the grassroots of Concord Park in Sheffield all the way to international and running the Premier League's referees. So thank you, Keith, for joining me.
Pleasure.
Okay, and any information, any feedback, feel free to tweet us. Thank you.